The coffee pot hissed like a warning flare while the ceiling fan chopped the August heat into impatient quarters. Lemon oil and aftershave clung to the Hullbrook kitchen the way old orders cling to a barracks wall. My dress whites hung on the chair back, bright and useless. Dad stood by the sink with his new wedding band flashing like a rank he hadn't earned in my life. Elaine, perfume like cold lilies, smiled at the stove without looking at me. "Under my roof," she said, butter sliding in the pan, "we do things properly." Dad didn't clear his throat. He leveled. "Avery," he said, tone set to parade ground, "serve my wife under this roof or you leave." The sentence hit like a hatch slamming. My fingers tightened on the chip mug until the glaze squeaked. The refrigerator kicked on. Somewhere a fly worried the screen. I heard my own pulse the way you hear a helicopter before you see it. I set the mug down. "Understood." Elaine's smile found the reflection in the microwave door. "Good girl." I took my duffel from the hall, canvas still dusted with Djibouti, zipper teeth honest under my thumb. The house smelled like lemon, not home. My mother's photo watched from the mantel in its thin brass frame. The star flag beside it folded into the old triangle that never sags. Mom's handwriting lived in my wallet on a torn envelope edge. "Forgiveness mends what pride destroys." I wasn't ready for that sentence yet. I folded it back. Dad followed me to the door. "Don't be dramatic," he said, as if deployment were a hobby and dignity a show. "You made this choice." "I did," my voice held, "and I'll make the next." The latch clicked. August air took the hallway in one dry breath. Gravel bit under my boots. I loaded the duffel into the trunk like ordnance, deliberate, careful. The car smelled like sun-baked fabric and last week's coffee. My uniform brushed my knuckles when I pulled the seatbelt across. The fabric felt like the only thing in the world that still told the truth. I drove to the motel on Tidewater Drive where bleach lived in the curtains and the ice machine coughed all night. The room key was heavy in my palm, a small, square permission to stop saluting grief. I lay awake and listened to the AC rattle a rhythm that wanted to be a lullaby, and failed. The phone stayed dark on the nightstand. Black glass, my reflection a thin ghost. On day 2, I walked into the Veteran Outreach Center in Norfolk with a resume that didn't brag. Mrs. Dalton, the director, shook my hand like a landing. The lobby smelled like coffee and printer paper and something clean underneath. Purpose, maybe. I stacked canned goods, filed intake forms, learned the names of men who wore hospital wristbands like witness bracelets. Marcus Hawk, seal eyes, civilian patience, taught me the cadence of listening when stories come out sideways. We stood shoulder to shoulder under buzzing lights while a Marine tried to remember his daughter's birthday and the year he stopped sleeping. The work was a quiet that made sense. 2 weeks later, I wiped down a folding table at closing while the sun burned itself down to a gold seam. My phone lit the inside of my pocket with a small aquarium glow. Missed call, 1, then 2. Then numbers climbed like a bad heart rate, 12, 27, 41. 48 missed calls, all from the number still saved as Dad, home. Heat prickled between my shoulder blades. The center's hum went thin. Even the old soda machine seemed to listen. I stepped outside. The parking lot smelled like hot tar and a storm thinking about itself. On the 49th ring, the voicemail caught. His voice, reduced, scraped the speaker. "Avery, static swallowed a word. Need help." The wind shoved at the flag on the center's pole until it snapped once, then held its crease. I stared at the screen and watched the past put its hands up, finally finished pretending to be strong. I slid Mom's letter out of my wallet and didn't open it. Not yet. I put the car in gear. The duffel thumped behind me, the sound of a life choosing its next mission. I grew up in a house where the flag wasn't decor. It was a calendar. Dawn meant halyard squeak and canvas whisper, Dad's boots on the porch like punctuation. He'd taught airmen to obey the sky. At home, he tried to make silence stand at attention. Mom, Sarah, softened the edges. She smelled like flour and warm laundry, and her handwriting turned grocery lists into small poems. When cancer took her, the house changed pitch. The clocks got louder. The air tasted like antiseptic and church breath. Dad folded her star flag into the tightest triangle I'd ever seen, set it on the mantle like a command he refused to break, and remarried so fast the paint on her nameplate was still fresh. Elaine arrived wearing perfume that reminded me of cold lilies and long hallways. Her laughter echoed. She moved through rooms like a new rank, younger, elegant, everything in creams and glass and rules that weren't ours. She called my deployments escapes, my uniform a statement piece. Dad let the comments land without interception, like jets waved off in bad weather. He'd clap my shoulder at holidays and aim a smile just past me. Publicity, he'd say when a local paper printed a tiny square about a rescue in Bahrain. Navy loves its photos. The metal pinned to my blues felt heavier afterward, not prouder. Afghanistan tasted like dust and burned barrel smoke. Djibouti sounded like rotor wash and radio hiss, the kind that lets you know a medic found a pulse. I learned to pack grief and water in the same pouch. I learned to admire the good monotony of a hospital wristband when the op went wrong and living counted as fancy. We flew nights so the horizon hid our decisions. We landed days so families could count faces. There's a kind of love you can only practice in a flight line's heat. Quiet, unglamorous, measured in clipboards and fuel. I was good at that love. Homecomings got smaller. Elaine centered dinners on her schedule in my absence. Salad forks, right? She'd chirp. And Dad would nod as if discipline were a flatware map. The room smelled like lemon oil and magazines. My mother's letter lived folded in my wallet, the crease worn silky by my thumb. Forgiveness mends what pride destroys. I read it some nights in base housing under an AC that rattled like an old argument, then slid it back because forgiveness is heavy when pride won't share the weight. Norfolk became another out and back into a world that couldn't decide whether I was daughter or guest. When I wore civvies, Elaine forgot my last name was hers. When I wore blues, she remembered and asked me to hang coats. Dad's attention worked like weather, occasionally generous, mostly high pressure. The only time he met my eyes was when I saluted the veterans' flag at the parade, and he remembered a version of me that hadn't contradicted him yet. Our last good conversation happened on a day with rain pressing against the glass. He held the mug Mom used to love like it might confess something if he warmed it enough. You could come into the firm, he said, as if the years hadn't already been spent. Learn a real trade, settle. Wear something that doesn't need salutes to make sense. I already wear what makes sense, I said. And I don't need you to see it for it to be true. He flinched at the word true the way men do when they've mistaken volume for proof. After that, we narrated the weather to each other and pretended it was a relationship. Then came the wedding, Elaine's lace, Dad's smile set in polished stone, my dress whites brushed to a gloss that made strangers nod. I watched him promise diligence and kindness to a woman who'd never carried his silence, and I understood what my mother's letter had meant about pride and mending, but not how to hold it without cutting my hands. In the kitchen, 2 weeks later, he delivered the ultimatum with his back to the sink and the fan chopping August into impatient quarters. Under my roof. Serve my wife. Like the oath I'd taken meant less than the name he'd chosen for himself. I left because obedience wasn't the lesson Mom taught. The first night I folded my uniform over the motel chair and let the fabric cool in the AC's blue hum. There's a particular sound the world makes when your last tie phrase, like a dial tone on a deadline. I accepted a shift at the outreach center the next morning because paper, cots, coffee, and names were still things I trusted. Mrs. Dalton put me with intake. Marcus taught me to dispense dignity in measured doses. The place smelled like burnt coffee and printer toner and unglamorous mercy. I learned where the blankets lived. I learned which veterans hugged the wall and which needed a joke to cross a room. At night, my phone lit with small human signals, a text from a corporal in relapse, a 2-ring call from a widow who just needed the sound of breathing on the other end. I answered what I could. I slept in the duffel bag's shadow and stopped craving the hallways where lemon polish tried to prove something. 2 weeks of clean silence taught me more about forgiveness than a decade of swallowing my answers. I ran on the piers at dawn and let the harbor air salt my lungs. I folded donations so the seams lined up. I said so to men whose chests bore wars I wasn't alive for. The flag out front kept its crease whether I was looking or not. and in a drawer, my mother's letter waited without demanding to be right. When the calls began, one, then two, then a rush that felt like an artery letting go, I watched the screen climb past 10 and into numbers that made my hands sweat. 48 missed calls stacked like a small wall. Dad's house, same tone, same insistence. Forgiveness had asked me to be patient. Crisis asked me to move. The next ring would be the one I answered. Closing time at the center smelled like bleach and burnt coffee. I stacked folding chairs until the metal squeaked and wiped the table in long, even strokes, the way you calm your own head. Outside that the veteran's flag snapped once in a salt breeze and held its crease. My phone pulsed in my pocket. One throb, then another. Missed call, 1. I slid the rag into the bucket. 2, 5, 9. Marcus called from the pantry. You good? The door thunked. A can rattled. Fine, I lied. The screen went on strobing. By the time I stepped into the parking lot's heat shimmer, the number stack had turned ugly. 17, 24, 33, all the same contact I still hadn't renamed. Dad, home. Asphalt breathed warm tar. Gulls heckled the dumpsters. I thumbed the volume down and watched the tally climb anyway. 48. The last voicemail icon blinked like a weak pulse. I pressed it. His voice came through sanded thin. Avery, Static chewed a word. Need help. Then the line died as clean as a door shutting. The AC in my car coughed awake with the stiff smell of old filters. My duffel bag thumped when I braked too hard, a reminder that I knew how to leave before I knew how to stay. I set my uniform aside on the passenger seat, sleeve brushing my knuckles like a reprimand. In my wallet, Mom's letter waited. Forgiveness mends what pride destroys. But the paper felt heavier than my hands could hold yet. I tapped the envelope twice and slid it back. Tap, tap. Call 49 lit the screen while I merged, same number, same insistence. I let it roll to voicemail and hated myself instantly. Call 50 arrived from unknown. I answered before fear could chew it. Static. A hiss. Then a woman's voice over a room tone that sounded like shoe rubber and monitored beeps. Is this Avery Hullbrook? Yes. My mouth went dry and the car tasted like hot plastic. This is... The line dipped, recovered. A neighbor on Reading Court. We've been trying to reach you. Your father's not himself. Behind her, a TV barked weather. Somewhere close, a tap dripped. I pulled to the curb and let the engine idle, the AC licking my face with chemical cold. Put him on, I said. Now. He's not... She lowered her voice. He said Avery and help. That's all we got before the line went dead. We called again. He didn't answer. The house was dark. My tongue found the back of my teeth, checked where resolve lives. Did you call 911? Someone did, she said. I saw lights, then they were gone. I hung up and dialed anyway. Dispatch answered in that flat calm that knows too many kitchens. Address? And she asked. I gave it. Status? I asked. Ma'am, a unit responded. Occupant transported. That's all I can... To where? Ma'am. To where? Keys clacked. Paper slid. Portsmouth General, she said at last. He was alone. The road bucked under my tires as if it were angry I'd waited. The calls had gone quiet, but the silence hummed. Even the turn signal ticked like an accusation. I hit a red, then didn't trust it and turned right on an empty. The hospital wristband I'd once worn flashed in my head. Plastic, sweat slick, proof you belong in a room where people answer for your pulse. At the light, my screen brightened again. Unknown. I took it on speaker, knuckles white on the wheel. This is Portsmouth General, the voice said, professional and warm as cold steel. Are you the daughter of Colonel Richard Hullbrook? Yes. Then you should come. The line held, waiting for my answer as if it didn't already know it. I gripped the wheel until the leather gave under my palms and felt the weight of my life swing from leave to return with one ugly, honest click. I'm on my way, I said. The flag at the center's pole shrank in the rear view to a stubborn triangle against a white sky. My duffel slid forward at the next stop, bumping the console, insisting. I gunned the engine and let the city blur, the AC roaring like a bad ocean, the future tasting like antiseptic and something older, the truth I'd been avoiding that now had my name. Portsmouth General smelled like iodine and floor wax. Fluorescence buzzed a thin halo over the intake desk. I flashed my ID and a memory, the soft bite of a hospital wristband sliding over skin, the way plastic announces you belong to a machine bigger than you. Daughter? The nurse asked. Yes. The word felt like a rank I hadn't worn in a while. She handed me a visitor tag and lowered her voice. He came in dehydrated, confused, said your name, then said, sorry. I nodded, as if apologies under oxygen were standard. The tag stuck to my collar like truth I couldn't peel off. Dad lay in a curtained bay, skin gray at the edges, hair crushed flat on one side. The heart monitor kept time like a stubborn metronome. An IV hissed a small mechanical kindness. He blinked, tried to sit, failed. Avery, he rasped. I'm here. I set my duffel down and stood where he could see the outline of my uniform folded inside. His eyes found the white, and then the ground between us. He swallowed. Elaine left. My jaw locked before I let it go. Where? Gone. He shut his eyes like that would turn off the room. And the money, also gone. A case manager appeared with a clipboard and a voice tempered for fire scenes. We found overdue past due notices in his pocket, she said. Utilities, mortgage delinquent. We contacted next of kin. Me, I said. The pronoun did its job without flourish. Mini turn. My phone buzzed with a new voicemail from an unknown number. I stepped into the hallway that smelled like old coffee and bad decisions. A realtor's chirp crackled the speaker. Ms. Hullbrook, this is Elaine's agent. We need signatures on the sale of Reading Court. Cash offers good through Friday. I stared at the ceiling tile grid. Sale is fraudulent, I said to no one. Stand by. Back in the bay, I lifted the sheet corner, looked at Dad's swollen ankles, the hospital band, Hullbrook Richard, tight on his wrist. I had worn the same plastic once in Djibouti when heat made friends with infection. He flinched when I touched the band. My fault, he said. Not helpful, I said. Vitals matter, shame doesn't. A detective in a rumpled blazer eased in, eyes taking inventory without scraping dignity. Ms. Hullbrook, Detective Lang, we have preliminary statements. He glanced at Dad, then at me. We need to ask about Elaine. Dad tried to square his shoulders. The pillow refused command. She handled everything. Everything? Lang asked. Bills, passwords. Dad's voice unbuttoned itself. She said she was helping. She helped herself, I said. Lang pursed his lips. We'll need financials, power of attorney, any signatures you can compare. If she forged his name, we'll find it. She used my name, Dad whispered. Because it opened doors. I took a breath that tasted like antiseptic and remembered vividly the veterans' flag outside the outreach center refusing to sag in a bad wind. Detective, I said, you'll get what you need. Start with the bank. Mrs. Dalton answered my call on the first ring. I could hear the center's copier whirring and Marcus laughing low with someone who'd finally come in from a long night. We're here, she said. What do you need? A desk, I said. A scanner. Coffee. Always, she said. Marcus met me at the hospital lobby with a to-go cup that smelled like the kind of courage caffeine can fake. Say the word, he said. Not that word, I corrected. This one, proof. We set up at the family consult room. A soft chair, a narrow table, a fake plant that believed in itself too much. I dumped mail from Dad's nightstand. A lopsided stack of envelopes with barcodes that meant urgent without needing vowels. 10 minutes later, we had a timeline. New accounts opened, old ones drained, credit cards and Elaine's maiden name attached to Dad's SSN. I scanned everything until the machine warmed to the job. Lang returned with a banker on speaker. Ms. Hullbrook, I'm Mr. Keene from Tide East Credit. I'm calling about transactional anomalies. Name them, I said. Wire transfers to an entity called Reading Sunrise LLC, he said, papers clicking. We show authorization by R. Hullbrook. Fax me the signature, I said. The sheet curled hot from the hospital's relic machine. Dad's name stared at me in slanted ink. The R was wrong. He always hooked his R like a fish. This one tried to be pretty. Forgery, I said, sliding the page into a new stack labeled Civil, Criminal. Freeze everything, reverse what you can, flag the rest. We need the account holder, Keene said, edging between policy and the right thing. He's wearing a hospital wristband, I said. He's also the victim. Keene exhaled. Understood. Mini turn. The realtor called again, cheerful as a fire drill. Ms. Hullbrook, the buyer is motivated, Beau. The seller stole, I said. Inform your legal. Any lock change will meet a badge. She sputtered, pivoted to empathy, failed, hung up. On the ward, Dad stared at the curtain pattern the way people look for messages. She said you refused respect, he murmured. She asked for service, I said. Different thing. He swallowed. The monitor tattled on his surge. I chose wrong. You chose easy, I said softer. It costs more. He blinked hard. You were always the soldier. I didn't take the win. Drink, I said, lifting the cup. He drank. By afternoon, Lang had a report number. Keene had a hold on accounts. Mrs. Dalton had emailed affidavits that smelled like laser toner and consequence. Marcus printed a flyer for the Veterans Flag Wall about fraud against elders. We'll host a clinic, he said. People think shame is a lock. It's a blindfold. At dusk, I drove to Reading Court. The front garden had withered in neat rows. The porch light was a dead eye. A notice fluttered on the door. Notice of sale, bold as a dare. I took a photo. Elaine's car was gone, so was the wedding china. The house still smelled like lemon oil and aftershave, but under it a note had soured. Cashmere perfume turned to the metallic tang of a lie. The neighbor from voicemail stepped onto her porch, cardigan tight around worry. He came outside, she said, called your name like it was a password. Then he sat on the step and stared at the road. Thank you for calling, I said. We tried to be kind to her, she added, voice going brittle. Elaine, she liked being watched. Predators do, I said. My phone buzzed. Lang, Elaine spotted at a title company downtown. We're moving. I texted back, add realtor records, she's liquidating. Answer, copy. Back at the hospital, the family liaison frowned at the door. Visiting hours ended. I showed the hospital wristband again, not mine, his. I'm not visiting, I said. I'm relieving. Dad dozed under thin blankets. The monitor's green line softened. I pulled the chair close and set my uniform across my lap. The wool smell steadied me. From my wallet, I slid Mom's letter into the light and finally let the sentence breathe. Forgiveness mends what pride destroys. The script still carried kitchen flour in its loops. I'm not there yet, I told the paper, but I'm walking. Dad stirred. Avery? Still here. I leaned in so he could hear it in bone. I'm going to fix what I can. He stared at the ceiling tile grid as if it might confess. Elaine said you were pride. I am, I said, just not the kind that needs an audience. His mouth wobbled. He nodded to the hospital wristband like it was a confession. You were always the real soldier. I was your daughter first, I said. I still am. The night shift nurse swept in on rubber soles with a blood pressure cuff that hissed like a tired snake. Number's good, she said. You two need anything? Time, I said. She smiled, professional and kind. We don't stock it, but we don't steal it either. Mini turn. My phone lit with a notification from Lang. Elaine detained, forged POA found, bank cooperating, mediation scheduled. A second message from Marcus followed. Mrs. D wants you on stage next month. Fundraiser. Name it the Hullbrook Initiative. Under it, a simple line only vets write to each other when big battles turn into paperwork. We've got your six. Through the window, the hospital's flag lifted once in a meek wind, then lay quiet, crease holding. I set my mother's letter beside the paper cup on the tray and slid my hand under Dad's. careful not to disturb the line. His fingers twitched like a man remembering tools. I'll stand next to you, I said. Not under you, not above you, next to. He nodded without moving his head. Understood. The word finally meant what it should. I checked the stack, court papers in order, bank holds in place, police report number circled in blue. The lane ahead wasn't clear. It was honest. The house might be lost, the money wounded, the pride humbled. But the work had turned into something I could carry, service in a different uniform. I watched the monitor's green line keep time and felt my own pulse sink to it, slow, stubborn, steady. In the morning, there would be signatures and hearings and difficult chairs. Tonight, there was a plastic wristband, a flag that refused to sag, a letter that finally fit my hands, and the quiet truth that love outlives orders when you let it. The courthouse conference room smelled like cold coffee and laser toner. Fluorescents hummed as if they had opinions. A small veteran's flag sat in the corner, its crease holding like a spine. I set my folder down. Court papers, bank holds, the realtor's voicemail transcript, edges squared the way I squared myself. Dad eased into a chair beside me, hospital wristband bright against skin the color of sleep. He looked smaller, but truer. Elaine glided in on heels that pretended not to hurt. Her lawyer trailed, brief the size of an apology and twice as slick. She wore cream, diamonds, and a look I recognized from mirrors I'd thrown away. Confidence without inventory. The mediator, a woman with a pen that clicked like a metronome, lifted her gaze. We're here to resolve title and fiduciary concerns. Elaine's smile went brittle. This is a misunderstanding. Then let's understand it, I said. Detective Lang slid a manila envelope across the table. Paper whispered like a warning. Forged POA, forged signature, wires to Reading Sunrise LLC, he said, voice dry as policy. Recipient accounts tied to your maiden name. We have confirmations. Elaine's mouth tightened. She flicked a glance at Dad. He asked me to help. Help doesn't empty pensions, I said. Her lawyer leaned in. My client believed assets were community property. Fraud isn't family, I answered. Mini turn. The mediator clicked her pen twice, then turned to Dad. Colonel Hullbrook, do you recognize this signature? She laid down a blown-up check image, black ink fat under unforgiving light. Dad stared. His hand lifted, shook, dropped. My R-hooks, he whispered. Always has. That one pretends. Elaine's eyes sharpened. He's confused. Dehydrated, Dad said, calm, not stupid. The room stilled, paper, plastic, a humming light. I slid Mom's letter from my wallet, the paper soft as cloth from years of being handled and put away. I didn't read it. I held it where I could feel the weight. Forgiveness mends what pride destroys. Not yet, but close. Mrs. Hullbrook, the mediator said, pen poised, do you contest the bank's findings? Elaine's chin rose a fraction. Richard wanted a fresh start. By selling his house without him? I asked. Her voice curdled. He's not what he was. Neither am I, Dad said. He turned to face her fully, wristband flashing, dignity unbuttoned, but present. You told me my daughter was pride. She is duty. Elaine's lawyer tried a new angle. Health stressors impaired consent. Lang placed a small recorder on the table. Click. Elaine's voice filled the room, phone audio from the title office lobby. Move it. He'll sign anything. He owes me. The air changed temperature by a degree I felt in my teeth. Elaine hissed, small and mean. That's not fair. Fraud rarely is, the mediator said. I pulled the photo of the notice of sale from my folder, laid it on the stack like a map finding north. Reverse the wire transfers, I said, not loud. Freeze the LLC, void the deed attempt. We'll accept repayment through restitution if required. He keeps the roof. Elaine's eyes went glassy, not with remorse, but with calculation failing. I loved you, she told Dad, each word a thin blade. He didn't flinch. You loved access. Minnie turned. The door opened with a slow sigh. 2 deputies in gray stepped in, badges reflecting fluorescent honesty. The mediator nodded to them, then to Lang. Civil has met criminal. We're done pretending. Elaine's chair scraped. This is harassment. This is arrest, one deputy said, even. Elaine Hullbrook, you're detained for fraud, forgery, elder exploitation. Her hand darted toward my folder, reflex more than plan. I placed my palm on the papers and looked up. No. She met my eyes then and saw a country she didn't own. For the first time since she'd said my name like a chore, she looked afraid of quiet. The cuffs clicked. Soft, final. The room didn't clap. The room aligned. She twisted for her last strike. You're cruel, Avery. I stood, the uniform folded over my arm, wool smelling like starch and the inside of aircraft that did their jobs. You left me no choice, I said, steady. But I chose forgiveness anyway. Not for her. For him. For me. Elaine stared like I'd spoken a language she'd never need. They guided her out past the flag. Her perfume thinned to metal, and then to nothing. The mediator signed 3 forms, pen scratching a clean path. House secured, she said. Accounts frozen. Restitution recommended. She looked at Dad. Sir, you'll receive a notice. Dad watched the door, then me. His voice found a ground it had avoided for years. Avery, he said, rough. You were always the real soldier. I didn't take the bait and build a statue out of it. I folded Mom's letter back into my wallet and set my hand over his wristband like steady weather. Be one now, I said. Stand with me. He did. He stood. Slow, shaky, upright. The deputies paused, then went. Lang capped his pen. The flag's shadow cut a neat triangle on the carpet. The coffee smelled burned. The toner smelled like victory you wouldn't brag about. On our way out, the receptionist looked up from her keyboard. Her eyes tracked the wristband, the papers, the quiet. She didn't speak. She just straightened in her chair. Stand without ceremony. Outside, that the day had the clean brightness of rain that changed its mind. The courthouse steps felt less steep. I tucked my uniform higher on my arm, squared the folder, and helped my father down each riser like it was a promise kept in public. The air outside the courthouse smelled like rain rinsing off hot stone. Dad's hospital wristband scratched his skin when I steadied his elbow. He didn't hide it. The paper stack under my arm felt heavier, honest weight. Across the street, a small veteran's flag over the VFW door snapped once and then held its crease as if the day had decided which way to face. Back at Portsmouth General, the discharge printer chattered, spitting forms that sounded like a tired woodpecker. I read every line. Dad signed the ones that mattered with an R that hooked like it used to. The nurse cut the wristband free, plastic snapping with a quiet release. He rolled it between thumb and forefinger, then set it in my palm. Keep it, he said. Reminder. Of being human? I asked. Of being helped, he said. Hard skill. The car smelled like sun-warmed upholstery and wintergreen gum. He watched the neighborhood pass like a man studying new terrain. The porch light at Reading Court was still a dead eye. I didn't slow. The motel room on Tidewater held a cot, 2 thin towels, and a hum that pretended to be comfort. I set Dad's bag down. He sat on the edge of the bed like a recruit waiting for inspection. Not much, I said. It's enough, he answered, steady, and then softer. Thank you, Lieutenant. He corrected himself. Avery. We ate diner eggs that tasted like heat and salt and beginnings. He kept starting sentences and abandoning them mid-air. I let the music from the television fill the gaps, the soft static of a ball game nobody cared about. When he finally landed one, it was small and precise. I'm sorry. Noted, I said. We'll do better verbs tomorrow. At the outreach center the next morning, bleach and coffee braided into that clean smell I trusted. Mrs. Dalton hugged me like a landing. We saved you a clipboard, she said. Marcus bumped my shoulder with his, eyes taking inventory and leaving dignity untouched. Dad hesitated under the flag in the lobby, then lifted the corner of a box without being asked and followed me inside. You can sort donations, I said. He nodded. Orders accepted. He moved slower than the younger vets, stacked cans label forward, watched how Marcus listened before asking for names. He kept his voice low, his hands sure. A Marine with trembling fingers flubbed a signature. Dad turned the clipboard and guided his grip like you do with a new driver on a wide road. The pen steadied. The man breathed. In the corner, the coffee machine hissed like a train exhaling. Mini turn? A reporter showed up with a lens that wanted a neat story. "Can we talk?" she asked, eyeing Dad's pale face, my uniform folded on the chair back by the door. "Later," I said. "We're still building the truth." Instead, we printed flyers. Fraud Prevention Clinic. Hullbrook Initiative fundraiser. The copier warmed, then sang. Pages fanned out, hot and useful. Marcus stapled. Dad aligned the corners with an efficiency that made the stack look more trustworthy. Mrs. Dalton set a jar on the table, pebbled glass, a slot cut in the lid, and taped a sign in my mother's script, copied from the letter, my hand shaking only a little. "Forgiveness mends what pride destroys." Dad read the words out loud, then again without sound. "She always was right first," he said. "Someone had to be," I said, and he didn't argue. We drove to 3 churches, the grocery, the VFW. Under each bulletin board's cork, there was a different kind of dust. The pushpins stuck with a small, satisfying pop. At the last stop, a man in grease-stained coveralls read our flyer, then looked at Dad's face and understood a thing without making me say it. He folded a 20 into the jar and tipped his chin. "Got your 6, he said. Dad's hand hovered over the jar, unsure whether to defend or accept. He chose accept. "Thank you," he said, voice that old command softened into service. Back at the center, we stacked chairs, swept the floor, set out folding tables that wobbled until they didn't. The room smelled like Murphy's oil soap and new purpose. Mrs. Dalton handed me the mic test. Check, check. And I hated my voice in the speaker until it settled into itself. I pulled Mom's letter from my pocket. The paper soft with years, the crease held. "Want to hear it?" I asked. Dad nodded. The room quieted the way good rooms do when the right kind of memory is about to speak. I read, "Forgiveness mends what pride destroys." Air moved. Not applause. A collective aligning. Stand from the back row forward as vets and widows and one anxious kid with a buzz cut straightened, without instruction. Dad's eyes shined with something that didn't need to be named. He cleared his throat. "I thought rank meant right," he said. "No mic, just voice." "Turns out right means repair. Thank you for repairing me." I passed the letter to Mrs. Dalton for the display table. Metal, court papers, the old wristband, the duffel bag folded like a flag, the jar with the first bills. The things that had broken us and the things that would keep us broken the right way. Open, accountable, in service. We closed late. The center's lights clicked off in rows. Night breathed against the glass. In the parking lot, crickets stitched the quiet back together. Dad looked up at the veteran's flag, dark and still, and saluted. 2 clean fingers, no theatrics. I didn't return it military perfect. I matched him. Daughter to father, soldier to man, both of us learning new posture. On the drive back to the motel, he rested his palm on the dashboard as if testing a wing for ice. "Tomorrow," he said. "Tomorrow," I agreed, "but we build." The phone vibrated once in my pocket, a text from Lang. "Restitution motion filed, house safe. See you at the fundraiser." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. In the room, Dad sat on the bed and unlaced his shoes like a man clocking off from a decent day. I set my uniform across the chair again and the letter on the nightstand. The AC rattled a rhythm that finally sounded like rest. We were not done. But the fire was out, and the beams held, and the floor was swept, and the jar had money in it that didn't belong to a lie. Tomorrow we'd name the stage, and the town would come, and the story would become a tool. For the first time in too long, I slept in the same room as my father, and felt safe. The flag outside found no wind and didn't need one. It had its crease. We had ours. The community center smelled like floor wax and paper banners, the kind kids paint with too much blue. Late light slid through high windows and turned dust into confetti. On the display table, Dad's clipped hospital wristband, my sand-scuffed duffel bag, a copy of the court papers with the judge's stamp sharp as a bugle note, and Mom's letter under a piece of glass so no one had to pretend it wasn't fragile. 5. Mrs. Dalton mouthed at me from the wings, raising a hand. The veteran's flag by the stage steps held its crease like a spine. I ran my thumb along its edge as I passed. Rough cotton. Honest. Marcus adjusted the mic. It squeaked once, then behaved. Neighbors filled folding chairs, service caps, church dresses, teenagers with shy elbows. A quiet climbed the room like a good tide. I caught the smell of coffee and citrus cleaner and nerves turning into purpose. Welcome, Mrs. Dalton said, voice carrying the shape of home. Tonight, we dedicate the Hullbrook Initiative, legal aid and emergency grants for veterans and elders facing fraud. She nodded toward me. Our program lead, Avery. The mic was warm in my palm. Thank you for coming, I said. We built this from a bad month in a good town. Mini turn. The back doors opened. A few latecomers slipped in. Lang in an off-duty jacket, the neighbor from Reading Court with a plate of brownies covered in foil, the greasy coveralls man who'd tucked a 20 into our jar and now stood in the aisle like he was guarding something that mattered. I told it simple. 48 missed calls, a kitchen ultimatum, a hospital bay, a realtor's chirp that sounded like theft, a mediation where truth had a badge and a pen. I didn't come back to win a fight, I said. I came back to do the paperwork of love. Laughter opened the room just enough to let the next breath in. I held up Mom's letter, paper worn to cloth at the fold. My mother wrote this years ago, this. I wasn't ready to carry it then. I read it slow so the words had time to choose people. Forgiveness mends what pride destroys. The sentence landed in the air and stayed. You could hear the AC hum bow to it. Dad stepped up beside me, suit pressed, cheeks thinner, eyes clear. He took the mic, shook his head at it, and spoke without. I stood wrong, he said. I stood on pride. My daughter stood on duty. She carried me through a door I should have held for her. He turned toward me. The room went so quiet you could hear the banner string creak. He raised his right hand and saluted. 2 fingers clean. No tremor. No theater. Lieutenant Hullbrook, he said, voice low. You are not just a soldier. You are my second chance. The breath went out of me like a wave leaving shore. I didn't return it with parade crisp. I raised my hand and matched him, daughter to father, soldier to man. The room stood. Not a clatter, not applause. Just bodies learning a better posture. Marcus rolled out a plaque covered in butcher paper. I pulled the tape. It gave with a soft, satisfying rip. Hullbrook Initiative gleamed in cut brass above a line we had chosen together. Right means repair. The light from the windows caught the letters and set them to work. We cut a ribbon because towns need their rituals. The scissors thumped through satin. The sound reminded me of a parachute's first friendly snap. Lang raised a hand from the doorway, chin dipping once, copy. The neighbor dabbed her eyes with a napkin and smiled like a person who knows the shape of relief. Donations slid into the jar with the quiet clink of coins deciding to mean something. After, people pressed hands into mine and said small sentences that felt like a town repairing itself. He did this to my dad. We didn't know where to start. I can teach the Saturday clinic. A teenage boy in a borrowed tie tapped the duffel bag with one finger. My mom's coming next week, he said. She's ready. I nodded. We'll be here. Dad lingered by the display table, fingers resting on the wristband he'd given me to keep. I wore it too long, he said. It taught what it had to, I said, and slipped it into the shadow of the letter so the hard thing and the soft thing could keep each other honest. Outside, evening unspooled. The parking lot smelled like warm asphalt and a coming breeze. The flag on the pole caught a little of it, lifted once, then steadied. We stood in the blue hour with paper cups of lemonade sweating in our hands. Crickets tuned up. Dad took my elbow, not to lead, to accompany. I thought I had to choose between being right and being loved, he said. Turns out right is repair. Love is the work. We walked to the edge of the lot where the grass took over. The sky did that military trick of looking both endless and precise. He stopped, squared himself to the horizon, and raised that clean salute again. I matched him. No words. Sunset brushed the plaque inside the hall. I could feel it even out here, gold on brass, like a promise you can touch. We drove home with the windows cracked, the car filling with cut grass air, and the faint clatter of folding chairs being stacked by people who weren't done helping. In the living room, I propped Mom's letter against the mantel for the night and tucked the wristband beside it. The triangle flag held its crease, patient as a kept vow. Before bed, I wrote a note for the program board with the smell of Sharpie in my nose. Hullbrook Initiative, Phase 2. Travel stipends, clinic schedule, legal hotline. Dad added one line in careful print. Call me to lift chairs. He underlined lift like a man who finally understood his job. We stood on the porch a moment longer than necessary, listening to cicadas and the neighbor's dog insisting on dignity. Dad cleared his throat. Permission to keep trying? He asked. Granted, I said, smiling because the word finally fit. We saluted the dark for no one's benefit. The house breathed. A real repairing sound. I slid Mom's letter back into my wallet. Forgiveness didn't erase the month. It built what the month tried to burn. Pride had cracked. Love poured through. Some wars end when we come home. If you believe real courage is choosing forgiveness over pride, subscribe for stories of honor, struggle, and the kind of healing only family can start.